Yeah, g'day guys, Steve here from Dirt Bike ADV. Sunday afternoon, first day of spring actually. It's quite exciting, but it's a cold, miserable day ironically. But out in the shed, going a bit stir crazy at the moment. As you can see, I've got a crutch on board. I've had my left hip done. Got the right hip done and replaced in 2018 and just got the left hip done Tuesday this week. So yeah, it's one of those things, done a lot of running, done a lot of different things when I was, a lot of surfing. Worked for 40 years on the tools. My hips are just worn out. Body's pretty sound other than that, but the hips were my weak point. And so, yeah, getting hip replacements, a bit of titanium, works very well. So the right hand one has gone very well for me. It's been in there for the best part of 6 years now. So hopefully the left one will be just as good. So while I've been sitting around sort of feeling sorry for myself, I sort of thought to myself, what can I do for myself for the next few weeks? Obviously I can still run my business, that's okay. What I'm going to do with myself. And I recently bought the TT350 and just building myself a little cheap adventure bike there, dual sport adventure bike. Maybe I could make a little series of videos about the process. I always say I'm basically here to doing what I do, but taking a camera with me. So I thought I'd just do a little video series about the process of turning a standard enduro bike into a lightweight adventure bike, with a focus on a tight budget. So not wanting to spend a lot of money. I've got a 78 Falcon out there I'm just about to send to the panel beaters and get resprayed, and that's going to cost me a lot of money. So budgets, I'm just sort of keeping my cash reserves to myself a little bit. So I only spent 2.5 on the 350. Obviously I bought the 350 TT so I could still do the Enduro. I can still got a dual sport that I can ride up in the bush and camp off, and I can do a bit of single trail if I want, once the hip gets better obviously. So I'm going to do a series of videos and we're going to cover off things like today about bike options, you know, what options are out there with regards to bikes. I'll drop some footage in, some images in of the different bikes that I think are suitable for this area of the market that we're talking about. Most of these bikes are going to be about 20 years old or less than 20 years old. You get past that 20-year mark and they start to get a bit hard for parts for. There will be a couple of exceptions. And so we'll talk about the bike options, so cheaper bike options obviously. We'll talk about going and buying a bike. So I'll do a whole series on all these sort of subjects about setting up the bike and maintaining the bike, about setting it up for camping off it, the camping gear, the cooking gear, and we'll actually eventually, when the hip gets better, I'll eventually take the 350 out, probably take my mate Daryl out. And he's got a 350 he's bought recently as well, and we'll go do our first camping trip off the 350s. So yeah, it's just a case really guys, like I say, of me just doing what I do and just taking the camera with me. One of the things I just like to add in and sort of just grabbing some images and doing a little bit of research on some of the bikes that I thought that I would offer is that I keep going back to this website called motorcyclespecs.co.za. It's a business in a website in South Africa, a guy named Tony, I think his name is. I constantly come across his website for specs, motorcycle specs. He presents them really well. There is advertising on the website, but it just presents really well with a nice big grey box of all the key numbers, and he presents them all the same way every time. So yeah, if you're sort of researching a bike, go to this guy, motorcyclespecs.co.za. He's really good. I love him. So again, as I say, as I start into these motorbikes, mostly 20 years old or younger, with a couple of exceptions, and I'm sort of leaning towards the longer striking, lower compression motors wherever possible, for the reason that they give you longer service between rebuilds and that sort of stuff. Yeah, just bikes that have a good reputation for being pretty reliable and cost effective and cheap to run. So anyway, let's get into it. So I'm going to start with the Hondas, and this is my first exception. So the XR400 is a great option. They are only run through to about 2004, 2005 in Australia. I'm not sure about the States and Europe, but certainly they're a very good option just because they're a bulletproof bike, and something I would have loved to have grabbed if they were viable for the very Enduros, the vintage Enduro, but they were too new. So they're probably the exception with the Hondas, but from then on, we basically go to the CRF 250Xs, the 450Xs, and obviously the CRF But both very good bikes. I've had a 250X before. They can be a little bit cantankerous to start, but a super reliable, well-built bike. Then you got the Honda CRF 300Ls, the 250Ls. Of course, in later years you get the rallies as well, and of course there's the 450L as well. So those 250, 450Xs, the 300Ls, the 250Ls, all very good options with Honda. On to Yamaha now, again going back a little bit before 2004, you could be like myself and go back looking at some of the TTs and the XTs. There was XT 350s, there was XT 600s, I think there was TT 250s, TT 350s, and again I think there was some TT 600s. Remember always, in Australia, you have to have a compliance plate. Check with your local authorities wherever you are in the world that the bike that you are buying is registerable, because we are going to go out adventuring. So the idea is that hopefully we can leave from home and we can ride to where the bush is and camp and ride home again. That's the goal here. So yeah, apart from that, obviously the more modern 2003, 2004 Yamaha WRs started. Brilliant bikes. The Yamaha 250F and the Yamaha 450F, really good options. When I first started on the adventure bike scenario, the 450R was, the 450F was the bike I went looking for. Ended up buying a Beta as it went. Great bikes right through the generations, no bad bikes right through those generations, right through to the current days. So lots of options there, still plenty of parts for them, so very good options. Another little sleeper is the WR250R, which was I'm going to say dual sport bike, a light enduro sort of, what's the word, more of a versatile bike. Riding with Tom, a local Australian guy, has ridden his little 250R all over the goddamn country. I don't know how he does it. Wrings the poor thing's neck all the time. But they're a great option as well. So if you can find a sneaky little 250R, very good option. Onto the Suzukis. Probably not going to mention any of the older Suzukis, but just the two stalwarts of dual sport bikes, and that is the DR650 and the DR400. Both very good bikes, and they go right back to when we were a caveman, basically. So you can sort of go back and find cheaper models of the 650 and the 400. Obviously, if you can get the electric starts, that's a bonus. But you go back through the models of those, and either of those bikes is a great option. Just choose your capacity. Basically, they're really good bikes, and really one of the sleepers, one of the bikes that's pretty hard to go past, to be honest. Lots of parts again, and lots of availability still for both those bikes. And the last manufacturer is the Kawasaki's, of course. Not a lot of range there for the Kawasaki's. Obviously, you've got the KLR and the Versys and those sorts of bikes. We're not in that market. We're in that lighter dual sport market. There is some bikes out there, the KLX 450, the KLX 300. I think there was a KLX 250 at one stage. Double check, make sure the KLX is road registerable. In Australia, it has to have a compliance plate with your engine number and your VIN number and all that sort of stuff. Just make sure when you're looking at models that the bike is road registerable. It could be a real trap to get it home and find, oh, hang on, I can't actually put this thing on the road, because you take it to Vic Roads and they say, no, sorry, that's not road registerable. You can only reg-rego that, and you go, oh God, okay. So just be careful with that. It's really a little bit ambiguous what models of the Kawasaki KLXs were actually registerable and what weren't. So yeah, just be careful with those. Beautiful, good bikes, no problems with all the Japs made good bikes. Yeah, so just be careful of the rego thing. Onto the European bikes. Obviously, we'll start with KTM. One of the sleepers for me, one of the best options for me, and this is what I started looking at, was the 2007, 8 through to 2000, and I think they went through to 2010, 11. KTM 4-strokes. So there was a 250, a 450, and I think they were a 530. Sorry, they were. They were great bikes. That generation of bikes were really solid. The suspension was good straight out of the box. The engines were solid. They were sort of the first generation of the really modern bikes. So they are really good, cheap bikes. They're really good options. And of course, from there, you can go on to, the 14, 16 models. right through to the current days, but obviously you're getting into the more expensive end of the market. But basically, in my humble opinion, probably about the 2007, 2008, they had holes in the shrouds on the tanks. Those models on are still very easy to get parts for, and were a very good option. And from there on to the current times, they're all pretty good options with the KTMs. Likewise with the Husqvarna, the current shape, the white Husqvarnas, the FEs, so the FE 250, FE 350, FE 501s, all those models are very solid bikes, no problems at all. When it comes to the red Huskies, it's a little bit of sort of buyer beware, I guess you'd say. I've had a couple of the red Huskies, great bikes. That was the era when BMW bought Husqvarna, and they developed the bikes together with the brand of Husqvarna. They pumped out some really good engines. The AJP sitting over there is one of those engines that was built when they were owned by BMW. So the engine was developed and designed about by Ampelio Marchi or whatever his name was. But the problem is KTM haven't supported that model or range of bikes, that 2008 to 2014 red Huskies. They're not necessarily supporting them for parts, so that's the only downside. The bikes are very good. They were very light. They were really well spec bikes, but parts were a bit of an issue. There is a mob in the Netherlands who bought up a lot of the red Husky parts, and you can still buy parts from them. They've got a really good online presence. But yeah, just be wary with the red ones. They made a great 250, a 310, a 510, and of course I think it was the TE 610 that shared the motor with my AJP there. All very good options, but just be wary of parts with those red Huskies. That's the only downside. And when it comes to the beaters, of course, you know I love my beaters. I've had a few beta motorcycles, betas as they call them in America. My first adventure bike was a Beta 480 or a Beta 480. Brilliant bike, absolutely brilliant. Put a fairing on it and a rack and sort of done it all up as an adventure bike, and it was neither here nor there. It wasn't good for long range touring, but it wasn't good for single trail, so to speak. So I ended up going to that 2-bike policy. Probably should have kept the Beta, to be honest. That's probably of all the bikes I've had, that and the KTM 690 have been my two favourite bikes, apart from the AJPs. So anyway, Beta, listen, they haven't been in Australia for a long time. So my advice would be to stick to the betas from 2015 on. They were in the country a little bit earlier than that, but certainly the 2015s, there was a big uptake, so there's lots of parts and lots of bikes and available. So yeah, they've got great options. They have that, the Beta 3, did they have a 250? No, they had a 350. They had the 390. The 480, of course, so very, very good options. I think they did have a 250 in the early days, not sure, 4-stroke. The 390, probably out of all these bikes, an older model 390, I'd probably have to say is the pick of all the bikes I'm talking about today. Lovely long stroking motor, nice light bike, good suspension, pretty bulletproof bike. So a great range of bikes. As I say, 390 for me. Probably out of all these bikes, it's probably going to be the best general purpose dual sport adventure bike, so to speak. And then the last of the Europeans is, of course, is the Shercos. Again, I'm going to probably give you advice here and say probably stick to the Shercos from 2017 on. They were here for, I think, in the sort of similar to Beta in the 2012, 2014 eras. But the earlier bikes were a bit clunky, a little bit awkward to get along with. So if you stick to the 2017 on with the Shercos, they really had themselves sorted and well and truly then. Obviously, I've just showed a Sherco 500. I've had a Sherco 2-stroke before. Great bikes, steer very well, no complaints at all. Great suspension setups again. So yeah, they make a 300, a 450, and in the later years, obviously, I had one of the 500s, which is technically speaking a 480. So there's some bikes, guys. There's some options for the Japanese, there's some options for the Europeans. So yeah, basically just go out, and I'm not a brand loyal person. I let fate decide to a degree on what bike I end up with. The 480 was a classic. I went looking for a WR 450. This Beta 480 popped up that was really cheap, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll give that a try, why not? I had a Beta X-Trader up until that stage, so I knew they were sort of a well-made bike, and that turned out to be a fantastic bike. So just try and be a little bit, open-minded if you want a cheap ADV bike, because something will pop up that's really cheap with low kilometres, and you go, oh, that's a bargain, I'll give that a try. So yeah, so just be a little bit open-minded with it all. From here, guys, as I said, I'm going to run through a few things about buying a second-hand bike and what I look for, my personal opinion. Again, I'm no expert, but my personal opinion on what you should look for when buying a bike. And then we'll start to have a look at just getting your bike ready for its first trip. So the first thing I do is pull the wheels off, and usually new bearings and tyres, and just check all that sort of thing. While I've got that off, I check swing arm bearings and headstead bearings and all that sort of stuff. So we'll talk all that through, and from there we'll go on. But anyway, guys, I'm out in the shed. My cup of tea's nearly done. My left hip is aching a bit, so I think I'll head back inside and edit a video or two. Thanks for watching. We'll hope to see you out on the trails not too soon, in a little while.